Hello, and welcome to day two of Possibility to Profit. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I am your host and facilitator over the course of this next hour or so. I'll be with you the next 3 days as well. So, again, just welcome. I want to begin this session by looking at the idea of gravity. I mean, that's essentially what we're going to be playing with here over the course of today. And as we talk about it, I want to make sure that we've got a pretty good understanding and a pretty good grasp of what it is that we're talking about here when we start thinking about what life can actually be about when we're looking to move possibility into profit. You know, what kind of goals do we set? Why do we set them? Where are we going with them? Those sorts of things. So that's what I want to talk about here today. And I'm going to move myself down just a little bit, and we'll bring the slides up here. Today, most people actually fail before they start because they haven't learned how to leverage gravity. And they haven't learned how to leverage gravity in a way that can allow them to be more successful quicker. And that's what I want to pay attention to here is how can you be more successful quicker? And yesterday I described a little bit about profit itself. And I invited all of us to move away from just thinking of profit in a monetary sense. Profit is a consequence of an intentional investment and a mindful, thoughtful investment. The idea of profit is that I invest resources, I invest energy, I invest time, I invest money, and I expect a bigger return. It's very simple, bigger return. Investing is different than spending, and that's a distinction that is important to make because a lot of people won't do some things because they are organized around spending. They don't have the idea of what, for the sake of what's coming back to me. And that's what I want to pay some particular attention to. When we're looking at this, it starts to change just really kind of how you think about how you move through life. And that's where gravity comes into play. So I want to take just a moment and actually define this word. What is gravity? Well, Merriam-Webster, the dictionary folks, says that gravity is a force of attraction that tends to draw particles or bodies together. Pretty simple. It's a force of attraction that tends to draw particles or bodies together. When you think of the sun, you think of the stars, you think of them, specifically in terms of our experience, the earth and the moon. The earth has a gravitational pull that has brought in the moon and keeps it in motion around the earth. And as a matter of fact, the gravitational pull of the moon influences our tides, and so we can see this. It's a force of attraction that tends to draw particles of bodies together. And the closer they are together, the more pronounced that gravity actually is. And when we put this in the context of the law of attraction, and this is where I'd like to go with this, most of you have heard about or are familiar with the notion of the law of attraction. The law of attraction is actually a secondary law, and it's subordinate to the law of vibration. Everything vibrates. Everything is always in constant motion, not unlike heavenly bodies, large masses that have gravitational pull. Gravity is a function of mass. And typically speaking, the more dense something is, the greater the gravitational effect. Take that out just a little bit. Obviously planets, stars have mass, and as a consequence, they have gravity. You take it down to the quantum level, and you've got atoms. Atoms have mass, therefore they have gravity, and it's exhibited by the fact that there's an electron field that hovers around the atom itself. You've got a nucleus, and then you start stepping that down, stepping it down, stepping it down, stepping it down. Each element has mass associated with it. Even something as fundamental as a quark or a lepton, you start getting down into these incredibly minuscule building blocks of life and of nature. Now, I'm going to bring Max Planck in here because, Max Planck, we're talking about quantum physics, as we start going into a micro conversation here. Max Planck was the father, considered to be the father, grandfather, godfather, if you will, of quantum physics. And he said, we can seem to get behind everything. We can step behind everything. But what we can't seem to get behind is consciousness. We can't seem to get behind consciousness. And from his perspective, and we'll talk about Werner Heisenberg in just a minute here, but from his perspective, there was something that was in play, something else that was in play. Why did this quark appear? What's behind that? What else lived in here? And this isn't a spiritual conversation in that sense. Something else is in play here, and we can't get behind consciousness is what he was talking about. And when we start looking at matter itself in a vibrational sense, Einstein, and I mentioned this in the session yesterday, Einstein famously said that matter doesn't exist, actually. It's all energy that's vibrating at such a degree that our senses are able to perceive it. So again, metaphorically and practically, this chair that I'm sitting in, it appears solid, and it is vibrating. I can't perceive that vibration, but it is vibrating. And it's vibrating in a way that actually is perceived by me. Now that becomes important when we start looking at the nature of gravity and the nature of what we have in our lives. Because things that vibrate at the phase level at which I live and occupy and think are going to be visible to me. They're going to be apparent to me. I'm going to be able to experience them. Things that are vibrating out of my experience phase, I'm not going to be able to access as readily. I may imagine it, but I can't really experience it. And that becomes important when we start looking at how you actually draw things to yourself. Everything is already created. Everything is always there. It just hasn't manifested itself. So we're going to look at that. So before we begin, I want to do a real quick and brief review of yesterday. So I'm going to pause and cough here for just a moment. Brief review. Yesterday, excuse me, started off by talking, basically showed you a little poem called Noticing. It was in your material from yesterday that I sent out the email around. Notice what you notice. For this reason, energy follows attention. Energy will follow where your focus is going. Most people are not aware of where their energy is going. It's kind of like it's always leaking. And as a consequence, they aren't as creative as they could possibly be or as effective as they could possibly be. You want to begin noticing what you're noticing. And one of the things that I wanted to point you towards noticing was your mindset. 95% of our behavior, and I mentioned this yesterday, 95% of our behavior is unconscious. Only 5% of our behavior is consciously regulated or intentionally directed. The rest of it lies in this arena called the subconscious. And the subconscious holds our mindset. It's our belief systems. It's our experiences. It's the meaning that we've made up. It's our sense of identity. All of that stuff kind of gets smushed together, if you will, to use a phrase my granddaughter would use, smushed together, and it comprises this thing that we call our mindset. So you want to notice where your energy is directing itself to, and it's usually directing itself to reinforcing that mindset. There's a gravitational pull to mindset. Make no mistake about it. There's a gravitational pull to mindset. We also talked about, and I mentioned this earlier, just a moment ago actually, consciousness as the first cause. And I gave you a reading that you were able to download off of yesterday's email summary by Neville Goddard. Consciousness is the first cause. And again, Max Planck, we can't seem to get behind consciousness. Everything else we can seem to find out what's it built on? What's it built on? What's it built on? We get to consciousness, we can't find a way to get behind that. It just seems to be there. That's important when we start looking at the nature of leadership. Leadership is the activity, and this is what I mentioned yesterday in terms of a definition, it's the activity of co-creating coordinated movement in such a way that it causes the actions necessary to produce the results that I say I want. Now, here's where this gets to be, I think, useful and interesting. Every one of us is a leader, whether you believe you are or not. For this reason, you are a leader. Leaders cause movement. Simply, that's all that a leader does. They cause movement in the systems in which they are actually participating. So You can actually walk into an empty room and you will be causing movement by your presence. You have gravity. This is called leadership presence in one sense. You have gravity associated with you because you have mass associated with you. So when you step into an empty room, you are causing movement. The air molecules have to start adjusting to accommodate the heat that your body is putting out. If there's a person in that room, they will notice you, and because they notice you, they have to move in some way to accommodate your presence. Every one of us is a leader because every leader causes movement. Now, not every one of us is effective in a leadership role, and that's the difference. Effective leadership is literally tied to this definition. It's co-creating with life. Life moves to and through me. To and through me. Consciousness. Do I have access to consciousness? Do I have access to that voice that says what else is possible? Leaders basically create possibility. That's one of the things that we're going to be paying attention to here. So it moves to and through me. I'm causing movement. Is it coordinated? Do I have to go back and clean up after myself? So, if you're looking for a profitable way of moving, you want to reduce expense. You want to reduce the consequence of what you're doing. So co-creating coordinated movement, is it elegant? No unintended consequences. That's one of the things that we pay attention to in the work that I do in leadership. So this is how we define it. This is what we're looking at. Gravity is present in everything that we're looking at here. So in summary, and this is what we're going to close off of from yesterday and move into for today. Leaders make possibility visible. That's part of the gravitational nature of leadership. They make that unseen possibility visible. There's gravity involved in order to bring that into people's awareness. And management, and I use the word management just as a placeholder here, there's an executional component to moving things into tangible reality. You want to move it from possibility to probable. When people begin to see it, this is where coordinated movement comes in. You start seeing probability here. This actually could happen. This could actually be something that I could work with. Managers are the ones that actually, and the activity of management is the activity of actually putting in place objectives, goals, tactics in order to make that happen. Leaders make the possibility visible. Managers execute on it. And in that execution of it, they actually make it a reality. And both of them are absolutely crucial to profitably turning a possibility into a reality. And that's what we're looking at here. So, in today's session, I'm going to be focusing on gravity. I'm going to be focusing on how you actually bring things closer, how you actually make them visible, how you actually bring them in, both for yourself, but also the people that you're working with. So strap in, and we'll see where we can end up here. So as we're moving here, I'm going to pull myself out of the picture for just a moment. I'm going to bring the screens back up so that we can see some things in a little bit better fullness, and start talking about goals. And specifically, I want to talk about what the purpose of a goal is. The purpose of a goal, very simply, is to grow. That's the purpose of a goal. We don't set goals, if we're smart about it, we don't set goals simply to grow. We set goals because they allow us to grow in our lives. And that's important. If you're not growing, you're not profiting. If your organization isn't growing, it's not profiting. You want to be in a position where growth is what we're looking for. For the sake of what do I want to undertake this objective? For the sake of what is this possibility important? If I'm doing things that allow me to get something, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with getting things. But what I want to be able to do is ensure that I'm growing in the process. Most organizations and many people will set goals. They will set goals for themselves that don't stretch them. They do things that they know how to do. They acquire things, absolutely, but they're not growing. And this is a big distinction. Possibilities are scary sometimes, especially big possibilities. This is where dreams are built. And you want to be able to move into that kind of a growth mindset that allows you to actually create movement that brings in greater possibilities. This is what we're looking for. And the question here, as you're looking for moving from possibility into profit, the question that always crops up when I start dreaming big is how? How? Now, this is an interesting question because it trips up a lot of people. How? How do I do this? Well, about 15 years ago, roughly, I started looking around. In my business, I basically develop leaders. That's what I do. Leadership development. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. I looked around and I noticed the healthcare system in the U.S. was not doing particularly well. It seemed to be toxically broken. And I thought, well, I might be able to do something there. I might be able to bring some sensibility, some practices, some ways of thinking about how this can be led, how this enterprise, how this market sector could actually be positioned. The problem was I knew nothing about healthcare. The only thing that I knew about a hospital was when I was in one when I was 9 years old and I had my appendix taken out. I didn't have a medical background. I have certainly no medical training except some basic CPR and first aid. Who do I even begin to talk to about this? So all of these things were coming into play in my mind about, I'm not sure I can make this happen. But I knew that I wanted to. The for the sake of what was so huge. I could make a difference here. And that's basically what my life's about, is how can I make a difference? So I started just playing with this notion of me being in the healthcare space, making a difference with hospital administrators, with medical staff, with doctors that are leading clinics. All of that sort of stuff. Far-fetched. I had no place to go in terms of where do I start. So I basically settled in and I just started imagining. I just started really living into the notion of what that kind of work would look like, feel like, smell like, taste like for me. And the more I got into that, the less worried I was about getting started. The more I got into it, the more I experienced I was already there. It just hadn't, it just hadn't happened yet. But I knew that was what I was doing. I was absolutely clear in my mind and in my body that was what I was doing. And then, truly, out of the blue, I get a phone call from somebody, an acquaintance, that a long time ago acquaintance said, you do some work in leadership. I've got a client here that could use some coaching. And I said, yeah, that's fascinating. Where do they work? It was a hospital system. I'd never worked in a hospital system. I didn't know anybody in hospital systems. And one thing kind of led to another. Today, fast forward, I'm on the teaching faculty of the American Association for Physician Leaderships and have been for about 12 years now. I lecture at universities. I've been a guest lecturer at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. I work with hospital systems around the country. I coach clinicians. I work with doctors. A large part of my body of work today is in the healthcare space, and it's even moved into pharma. So there's a lot that began to unfold as I started paying attention to the for the sake of what, and to the experience itself, that possibility began to live in me. What I did not focus on, I truly did not focus on how. I left it alone. I didn't pay any energetic attention to what's my first step here. That first step simply showed up. And this is very consistent with how Nikola Tesla talks about this. one of the most brilliant people of literally the last 4 centuries, possibly. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, how do you bring possibility into reality? How do you make it a profitable migration from possibility into reality? Think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Energy. Notice what you're noticing. That's where your energy is attracted. Frequency and vibration. How well schooled are you in understanding what that's about? When we start paying more attention to the why, or not to the why, to the how, what we're really doing is we're looking at, what are the things that we can actually work with. Einstein said, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, what we've called matter is simply energy whose vibration has been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no such thing as matter. Now, when you start thinking about things in this way, you start looking at it through the lens of frequency vibrations. Possibilities have mass. They do, if they occupy my mind. And one school of thought suggests literally that my thoughts have mass as well, because my thoughts are simply biochemical reactions in my brain. And a biochemical reaction is made up of all kinds of things that actually have mass associated with them. Very, very tiny, but they have mass associated with them. So my thought has gravity. Accumulated over time, that could be a fairly significant experience of gravitational pull. Now, I mentioned this yesterday. I want to review this, and I want to review this for a reason. And when we're thinking the course that we're working with here, I'm going to be repeating some things. And I'm going to be repeating some things for a very specific reason. Mindset is developed through repetition. When you're coming out of the womb, you start paying attention to things, and they start getting reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And this is the beginning structure of a mindset build. And this is how belief systems become viable. It's through repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. You start stacking things, and now you've got something that you can work with, and it has mass. It has a pull to it. I'm going to be introducing some things in these webinar sessions that I'm going to come back to over and over and over again, because repetition begins to shift the ways that you understand some things. So when we're looking at things, this is one of them that I want to pay particular attention to, and I come back to this in the work I do all of the time with my clients. Most people will think of life in a linear construct. Life isn't linear. Life is dimensional. Life happens in a frequency field. Now, through that frequency field of vibration, different levels of vibration, different frequencies, there is a timeline that actually does run through this. Make no mistake about that. Our experience of time for us is real. And that timeline, the arrow of time, has a past, it has a future, and it has this ever-present now that's always kind of running. Now, when you look at this graphic, you notice that timeline runs through a very specific phase area, frequency area in this frequency field. This past, present, future goes through a certain band, frequency band. And anything that is in that frequency band becomes available to me in practical, pragmatic terms. These are the things that I have in my life right now. They vibrate at a frequency that I'm vibrating at, and I've attracted them. There's a gravitational pull between that thing and me, my thoughts, my mindset. It all comes together and coalesces in this moment of now. That future that I say I would like isn't tied to this. You take past and future out of this thing, and you say, what would I like? What's that possibility? Well, that possibility exists. It already exists. Leonardo da Vinci envisioned the helicopter 300-400 years before it actually physically was manifested. Everything is invented twice. First as an idea, and then a physical manifestation occurs. Anything and everything that has ever been created has already been created. It exists in this frequency field. So that possibility that I'd like to have in my life exists out there, and I'm going to say it exists in the future, because that's the language that we use, but it exists at a different frequency than what I am currently experiencing. And how this works is when I begin, and this is what I did with my work with the healthcare example I cited just a moment ago. I start imagining, and the use of the imagination is huge here. I start imagining that it exists in my experience of it. And I exist in the experience of that bandwidth. And I hold that not just as an imaginal idea in my mind, but as a visible, physical experience in my body. I start literally finding my way vibrating to that tune, so to speak. And as I start moving, and this is what I did with the healthcare thing, I started seeing myself actually doing these things. I started seeing myself being these things. I started shifting my sense of who I was and where I belonged so that energetically I was there. And when I looked around, I started noticing things that seemed to be brand new, but they had always been present. That person that reached out and said, I've got a contact here that I want to introduce you to. Where did that come from? I couldn't have planned that. But energetically, I now set myself up to be in a position to notice what was now present at that different frequency level. And as a consequence, I now had that experience. And that possibility now became a reality, and it became a profitable reality. Make no mistake about it, it became a profitable reality. It was elegant, and it didn't take a whole lot of time to accomplish. I didn't have to go back to school to get a degree. All of the traditional things that my mindset said I needed to do, I didn't do. I just started being at this level. Now let's take this in a different way. Consciousness, like I said, Max Planck says that consciousness seems to be everywhere. We can't get behind it. And consciousness, in one sense, actually does show up this way. Again, we got these vibrational frequencies, and consciousness is present everywhere. It seems to be connected to everything in some way, shape, or form. It's 100% evenly present in all places at the same time. It just manifests in different ways. Anything that is on one of these frequency lines, will be carrying with it certain qualities, certain attributes. And I show up on that frequency phase, I will have access to what's on that frequency line. Another way of thinking about that, it would be just very simply a physical example. Again, everything is connected. And you take two components, hydrogen and oxygen, H2O, and you have water. Here's a glass of water. I apply heat to that glass of water, and something miraculous begins to change. It changes vibrationally. The molecules begin to vibrate at a different frequency state, and there's a phase shift that occurs. That glass of water disappears, literally, that glass of water disappears, and I'm left with steam, and I keep heating that steam. The steam disappears, and I've now moved hydrogen and oxygen into the ether. I can't see it, but it's still there. It's still there. It's in the ether. Now, cool things down a little bit, change the vibrational structure a bit. Phase shift occurs once again, and what's interesting is that hydrogen and oxygen molecules structure begins to show up in the form of clouds. And these clouds continue to gather more and more moisture. They start to cool, and the next thing you know, I've got rain that fills my glass of water. What's going on here? Well, very simply, what's going on is something that goes on all the time. It's a natural phenomena, and it is the way that the universe works. Consciousness is connected all the way through here. The thing that we call water exists all the way up and down this chain. The manifestation, how it shows up, is fundamentally different, predicated on the vibrational frequency. So you get to that different vibrational frequency, and you have a different experience, and you have a different result. Manifestation is a little bit different than creation. Everything that has ever been created already exists, and it exists on these frequency lines. Each one of these frequency lines, each one of these vibrational areas has stuff. Just call it generically stuff associated with it. And on that line, there is something that's there. Now, you're moving here, from, and this is the quantum physics structure, you're taking a wave function and you're collapsing it. You're basically collapsing it into a fungible, tangible, physical result. So moving from wave to particle where matter actually shows up. The analogy for the human experience is we move from spirit, what we call spirit, into the intellectual, into the emotional, and into the physical. And this is a profitable move if you're doing it well. Spirit, consciousness. Where do ideas come from? Well, ideas come from the thoughts that I have, and most people have around 70,000 thoughts a day. For most people, they are the same thoughts over and over and over and over and over and over, and I can go on and on and on here. We don't have unique thoughts because our mindset is so busy spinning stuff up. We want to be able to find a way to quiet things so that spirit, what we call spirit, that voice of consciousness, can actually speak to us. This is where possibility begins to emerge. When possibility begins to emerge through the voice of spirit, it begins to germinate and it gets planted into my curiosity. I start imagining what I could do with this idea, this thing that just popped in, this thought that I had that had another thought associated with it. And all of a sudden, my intellect starts to kick in and I start imagining. This idea starts to get bigger and bigger. It starts to take on much the same as what happened with me with healthcare. I started to get emotionally wrapped into it, emotionally tied into it. I started to have my identity begin to show up in the emotional experience. And the next thing I knew, I had a physical experience of that possibility now becoming a reality. This is how it works. How people think manifests the results that they have in their lives. How people think manifests our results. We want to begin to think differently. That's simply what we're doing here. We want to begin to think differently. Now, when we're doing this, one of the things that you want to pay particular attention to is the process of thinking, just kind of how your mind actually works. So when you're thinking differently, I'm going to move this over here, bring this over to here. How thoughts become prisons. And they do. Our thoughts become prisons. And I'm going to use the word thoughts and mindset here almost interchangeably here. Thoughts are biochemical reactions in the brain. That's simply what a thought is. It's a biochemical reaction in the brain. Brain releases chemical signals into the body, and there's a flow through. So I've got this thought. It's a biochemical reaction in the body. There's a chemical associated with that thought, that biochemical reaction, and the chemicals move through the body and they generate feelings. Okay? And the easiest way that I can think to illustrate this is through the use of a metaphor, an example that I love. I'm an aerobatic pilot. I love to fly. And very early on, my very first private pilot flight was an aerobatic flight, and I got hooked. And the thrill, the experience of being upside down, of rolling, of looping, I've flown aerobatics and gliders. It's just a ball. So where I'm going with this is not to have you think about yourself as an aerobatic pilot. I want to bring in the notion of a roller coaster. Everybody's familiar with what a roller coaster is. And some people can't wait to get on them. I'm one of those people. Other people, you couldn't get them on for all the money in the world. Okay? I don't want to do that. It's horrendously terrifying for a lot of people. So just think about this. You're sitting in the car of the roller coaster, and you get strapped in, you hear the clank, and then you feel the shudder as the chain engages, and you start climbing up this almost vertical hill. And as the cars start to drop off that precipice at the top, what kicks into your body? What kicks into your body? Well, there's all kinds of chemicals that get released because there's been thinking going on here. And that thinking is, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be so cool. Or you've been going, oh God, how did I get myself into this? This is going to be horrible. I'm going to die. Those thoughts will release certain chemicals into the body that generate certain experiences. Now, here's where this gets to be interesting, however, and it's an interpretive dynamic. You drop over the edge, and all of a sudden, your stomach moves up, tightens down, palms get sweaty, your eyes dilate, flushing of the skin happens, your heart rate goes up, your breathing moves up into your chest, and it becomes very shallow. How do you describe that feeling to yourself? Well, if you're the person that's going, oh God, this is going to be the most exciting thing in the world, you're going, that feels like excitement to me. If you're the other kind of person that's going, oh my God, I'm going to die, this is horrible, that experience, that feeling structure in your body physiologically feels like fear. Physiologically, fear and excitement manifest in the same way. They are exactly the same feeling structure. The only difference is the description. The only difference is how I've assigned meaning to the event that's going on out there and how I interpret then the feeling. And it gets locked in. It starts to get locked in as a fear or as an excitement. Take your pick. And you literally get to choose. When I'm talking about noticing what you're noticing, I'm not talking about necessarily noticing your body here in this sense. I'm noticing what's the activity in your brain. What are the thoughts? What are the thoughts that you're associating? And how do they then create experiences in your body? Brain releases chemicals. The brain releases chemicals that, like I said, signals are transmitted into the body and they produce chemicals. Cortisol, serotonin, take your pick here. Adrenaline, all of these things get released into the body. Now, we get addicted to this. If we're not really paying attention, we can get addicted to this. And this is where people will get entrained into this is either exciting or this is fearful. We end up feeling the way that we think. And there's a different way to handle this. There's a different way to think about this. And this, again, is how thoughts become prisons. Chemicals are running through our body. Chemical signals are running through our body. Cortisol is there. Stress is being built up. The brain monitors the status of the body. They go, what's this? Oh, that's interesting. Something's going on here. Something's going on. Brain generates thoughts that produce corresponding chemical messengers. So there's a loop system. You end up in this interesting self-reinforcing loop. And we end up thinking the way that we feel. So we started out feeling the way that we think. And then we end up thinking the way that we feel. Then we start thinking the way that we feel. And we feel the way we think. And it just, away we go. What begins to occur is something very interesting. The mind now becomes a prison. And this is where mindset begins to have such a gravitational pull on your ability to be productive and creative and innovative. You've neurochemically memorized an emotion that has now become part of your personality. I'm not the kind of person who, there's an emotion attached to that. I am the kind of person who, there's an emotion attached to that. I can't do this, I can do this, there's emotions attached to that. When I started looking at being in the healthcare space, the first thing that popped up for me was this emotion, that triggered a thought that said, who do you think you are? You don't have any education in that area. There was an emotion attached to that. I noticed the thought, and I started working with that in a different way. When you've neurochemically memorized an emotion that's now part of your personality, what you've essentially done is become addicted to the emotion. I'm not good enough. That's one emotion that begins to create thinking. You get addicted to an emotional state. Feelings become the way that we think. That doesn't feel right to me. Well, what do what would you like to do with this? Well, my gut says no. You can't think greater than you feel. And when you find yourself in this position, you are in trouble. When you can't think outside of how you feel, you're held captive. There is gravity to this. And you want to be able to break those gravitational bonds. How do you do that? Well, that's where we're going. The master mindset. You've got a mindset already, and the mindset actually rules you. You think the way you feel, and you end up feeling the way that you think. The master mindset here says that there's something else that we can do. And I'm going to give you a couple of tools here that you can actually work with. This is the one that I worked with when I moved into the idea that I was already working in the healthcare space. It's already happened. It's already happened. It's already there. And I started just playing with that notion. The master mindset. I've started playing with the idea that it's already happened. What's in place there? So what would I feel like if I was standing at a lectern in front of a bunch of docs? How would I feel? What would I be saying? What would I be bringing to the table? For the sake of what came into play here? Why is this important to me? All of these things started to be part and present of my way of thinking, and I started moving beyond this "who do you think you are" conversation into "this is who I am" conversation. There was a migration there, and it began with the assumption that it's already happened. And remember that frequency field, that possibility existed. It still exists. So that's where I went. So it's already happened. That's what you start to play with. You start to go into that idea. And the corollary to this is it's already happened. I just haven't arrived yet. It's already happened. I just haven't arrived. And this is how people think that results manifest. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. You start moving beyond this. And again, I'm going to bring time into play here. Gravity comes into play in this context. There's a past, there's a future, and there's this now that lives on this timeline. And we are so schooled in looking at how results are produced. Now, I want you to notice something just graphically on this slide. There's the now. Look at the space between now and desired results. It lives out there in the future. It has mass. My experience of current reality also has mass. Two bodies that have mass that are separated by great space, and as a consequence of that, separated by great time, don't have a huge pull on each other. The gravity still exists, but they don't have a huge pull on each other. They aren't attractors. Now, you start imagining, and this is where I went with this, it's already happened, I just haven't arrived. You actually take that desired result and you bring it into your current experience. That desired result still has gravity associated with it, but as soon as you start drawing it closer to yourself, as soon as you start bringing it into your experience, you take that present and you take that future and you start bringing them together. You've got two bodies that have mass associated with them. You now have a gravitational pull, and what seems to be magic begins to occur. It's already happened. I just haven't arrived, except when I start to do this, I actually have arrived, or it has arrived. Take your pick. But what's happened is there's been a phase shift that's occurred. And that's what we're looking at doing here. What most of us will do is we will think in terms of how we are trained to think. It's a cause-effect correlation. I've got to have this event before that result. And then we start projecting that into the future. We start looking forward with that. This is not how life is designed to work. It really isn't. This is how we've designed it to work. But it's not how life is designed to work. What's going on here is very simple. Physical time and space emerges because we think of ourselves as separate. Everything that has ever existed already is existing. It just hasn't been manifested yet. It exists because consciousness is everywhere, it exists in me. It exists as a part of who I am. Make no mistake about it. Whatever possibility that you would imagine yourself stepping into, it exists in you because it moves to and through me. The Spirit moves to and through me. I become a vehicle for the manifestation of that reality. That's what we're looking at. This is where we're trying to move. This is what we're looking to have happen. So the question, and this is an appropriate time, I think, to ask the question, how? How do we do this? And that's where I want to go. As we start bringing a little bit more granularity to this. When we start thinking about it, one of the things that we want to pay attention to is a couple of ideas here. Number one, Werner Heisenberg, I mentioned him at the very beginning. Objects exist in a suspended state until observed, when they collapse into just one outcome. Now, Werner Heisenberg was a contemporary of Max Planck, and this statement actually became known very famously in quantum physics, and it was the Copenhagen definition of quantum physics. Objects exist in a suspended state until they're observed, and I want to focus in on this word observed. Observed here has to do with not just visualizing it, but experiencing it, energetically, fully experiencing it as being valid and real now. And it's that full observational experience, or that first experiential observation of it, that collapses that possibility wave function into a practical, particular reality. That's the movement. The imagination is in gear here. Without the play of the imagination, nothing of consequence was ever produced, said Carl Jung. You want to use your imagination to its fullest, and most of us, by the time we got to be about 4 or 5 years of age, we stopped playing with our imagination. It got schooled out of us. Stop daydreaming. No, I want to daydream. I really do want to daydream. When you start doing this, you start paying attention to different things here. And when you're doing this well, you're really focusing on not creating things. You're looking at manifesting. The future isn't about goal creation. It's about manifesting what already is. And this is where gravity comes into play. You want to be able to imagine that in such a way that it has mass associated with it, and you begin to bring it into your current reality experience because it has mass. You close the space-time distinction. You close that space, and you imagine it being real now. You imagine it being here now, which brings us to how this works. Physical time. Whoops, we're going in the wrong direction here. There we go. Bring that back up. Oop, back that back up again. Okay, gratitude. What's going on with my screen here? There we go. The idea of gratitude. This is one of the things that I'm going to give you as a practice. But what we're working with here is the idea that it's already happened, I just haven't arrived. Now, this is where gratitude comes into play. It's impossible. It's literally physically impossible. It's emotionally impossible. It's intellectually impossible for me to feel gratitude for something that I have not experienced in my life. I can imagine something, and I can be thankful that I can imagine it. I can be grateful that I can imagine it. But to be truly grateful for the fact that it exists now, to be grateful for the fact that it is here now, in the presence of my physical senses telling me that it doesn't, that's the trip. That's how you work this. I move into gratitude for the fact that it's already here. It's already here. Even though my senses tell me it's not, and everybody around me tells me that it's not. We're going to talk about that one in just a minute here as well. Gratitude is a singularly powerful tool. And when you're working with gratitude effectively, you're working with it in a way that brings that possibility into your current experience. And here's the assignment that you're going to get with the accelerator reading that you're going to get in the email following this session today. It's a gratitude list. I want you to do this every morning. Every single morning between now and whenever you want to stop. But I've been working with a gratitude list for probably 15 years now. I'm so happy and grateful now that, and underline that word, now that. The implication is it's already here. And then this list is 10 things, 10 items, 10 states, 10 whatevers that I am grateful that now exist in my experience. I'm so happy and grateful now that my bank account is reflective of a ludicrously profitable business. Okay? I'm not talking about how I got it. I'm just, and then I stop. And this is what I did with my work with the healthcare movement. I stopped and I started thinking about, okay, I'm grateful that I'm lecturing at the university's medical center. And I would stop and I would be grateful in the sense that I would close my eyes and I would imagine being on that dais. I would imagine people in the audience. I would imagine the titles that they had, the disciplines that they worked with, oncology, geriatrics, whatever it was, cardio. I imagined them listening to me, and I imagined them listening to me in a way that they were taking things away that were valuable to them, that made a difference in how they actually operated in their environments. I imagined that in such a way, and I was grateful for it in such a way that it lived inside me, and that was the key. That's how you begin to move possibility into reality. You start with where it lives in you. It has to be real in you before it can be real out of you. Make no mistake, how it is within is how it is without. So you start working with this, and you're getting, the handout that you're going to get that is a PDF is a list. It's a gratefulness list. Now, the other thing that you can work with here, and this is one where I started paying some particular attention as well, is in the field of leadership. Okay, the domain of leadership. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning here, leaders cause movement. All leaders cause movement, and you are no exception. So when you're causing movement, what kind of movement are you causing? Is it coordinated? Does it get you where you want to go? Is it the kind of movement that is co-creating with an ideal that you say is important to you? That's what we're looking for. What's that ideal that you want to move towards? When you're doing this well, you start doing something very interesting, and it's tied into this this gratitude practice, and it locks you into this notion of effectiveness. Here's the challenge. Here's the assignment, if you will. I want you to begin behaving as if it already existed. Literally insist that you and everybody around you behaves, thinks, feels, speaks as if the future were already here. Stop and think about that. You've got this ideal, this possibility that you want to bring into reality. And you want to do it in a profitable way so that you have mitigated any unintended consequences. It's profitable for you. Insist that you, starting with you, behave, think, feel, speak as if the future were already here. You act as if it were already real. Now, people will think you're crazy. They're going to look around and they're going to say to you, "What in the hell are you doing?" And you're going, you're right. I mean, I don't see it right now. And it's an and. This is what we're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. I begin thinking. I begin behaving. I begin feeling. I begin speaking as if it were already real, as if I had already arrived, because I have that energetic power to move at a phase level into a different reality structure. It already exists. That's where you want to go to. Now, one of the things that would be useful to pay attention to here, and I'm going to bring a piece of paper up here. I was in an interview the other day with a fellow by the name of Ashish Advani. Ashish is the CEO of of Junior Achievement Worldwide. Fascinating guy. I had him on my podcast, The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. And if you haven't subscribed, you need to subscribe to this podcast. It's a killer. It's great. I've got some incredible guests that speak about some unbelievable things. And one of the guests was Ashish. And like I said, he's the CEO of Junior Achievement Worldwide, over 10 million members. working with young adults. And he cited something that I was just thunderstruck by. And I'm going to just read this directly here. The average worker that is entering the workforce today will have 20 jobs and 7 careers in their lifetime. 20 jobs and 7 careers. Now, the 20 jobs thing I could kind of get my head around. But 7 separate, distinct careers. What's going on with that? Well, what's going on with that is a lot of change. Things are moving pretty fast. What I'm good at today, it's interesting. How will it serve me tomorrow? And that tomorrow is where possibility exists. That tomorrow is where we move. How do you move that possibility into a reality that is in alignment with who I feel myself to be? And I need to examine who I feel myself to be, because that's where mindset comes in. Insist that I and everybody around me behaves, thinks, and feels and speaks as if that future were already here. What am I good at? I'm good at teaching leadership. I'm good at developing leaders. I'm very good at developing leaders. I hadn't done it in the healthcare space. It was just a phase change. That's all it was. It was a phase shift. So when we're looking at this is where you want to go. So look for the email that's going to be coming at the end of today's session. I'm going to have two suggestions. There'll also be a link to the replay of this. And what we have coming up next is my good friend, Dolan White, once again. And Dolan is going to interview a fellow by the name of Doug Decker. Now, Doug is also quite a good friend of mine. And that friendship developed over the course of this last year. Doug was a member, one of the original members of my Leadership Mastermind, my Leadership Mindset Mastermind. It's a year-long program. And when you think about taking a year to do something, it's kind of like, why would I take a year to do that? Well, because we're working with mindset. Mindset gets developed through repetition. And this book over my shoulder here, Leadership Mindset Weekly, is basically the blueprint for how we worked in that Mindset Mastermind program. Doug is an engineer, and he worked at Northrop Grumman. He's now a technical fellow. He's brilliant. He's absolutely a brilliant aeronautical engineer. And he took part in the Leadership Mindset program for a very specific reason. And he's going to talk about some of the things that happened with him and for him as a consequence of being part of that mastermind program. And my friend Dolan, who was also instrumental in helping me develop the mastermind program, will be interviewing him. So, gentlemen, I'm going to pass this back to you, and I'll fade myself out of the way here, and Dolan will introduce Doug.
So thanks for taking time. I appreciate you doing this today. So tell me a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself and what you do.
Okay. My name is Doug Decker. I am an engineer. Worked in the aerospace community for 37 plus years at a particular company, working on fighters, bombers, satellites, all kinds of neat things. And graduated from Arizona State University, played some football there, and did wind up getting my degree. So I was one of a couple on the team. So I've been doing that. I retired a little over 2 years ago, and now I'm doing consulting on my own. So kind of an analytical kind of guy, love aircraft. Not so much as comfortable with the touchy-feely kind of things, and other than just show me the data. So that's kind of my personality.
Awesome. That's a great introduction. I appreciate that. So knowing that you maybe not so comfortable with what you kind of from a touchy-feely perspective, what attracted you to participate in the Leadership Mindset Mastermind? Why did you become a member?
Single point introduction from a very good friend of mine who I respect, Dolan White. He recommended it, and got me involved, and so I started it. I wasn't coming in cold. Not that I've never done any touchy-feely kind of things. I have done Dale Carnegie things in the past, which I got some good things out of. And as you should always work on your weaknesses and not on your strengths. Is my thought. If I'm not a touchy-feely guy, well, then that's something I should start working on. So I figured that would probably be value added.
That's awesome. That's a great point. Working on weaknesses, I think, is something we have to be focused on. That's a big thing. So as a participant in the mastermind, what kinds of things were you able to take away from the mastermind to help you in your career or help you with your clients, or what kind of things were you able to use to apply to what you do?
Well, I do have actually here. If I pick out my wall, I've got some things I printed out from them, and this one's the 6 dimensions of trust that I printed out. And competence, consistency, courage, character, caring and empathy, and composure. And really, two of the things that I got out of it is, one, it is all about relationships. It's not, are you technically right? Are you the smartest? When they can get that, that's good, but you can be technically right and the smartest person, but if you don't have a relationship with a customer, and if they don't trust you on a level, is another thing. It is really all about trust and relationships. I kind of thought that, but Mastermind reinforced it, because the relationship will, in all exchange matters, if it's just transactional, you'll never get past the whoops that you do. If it's only, oh, you failed on this, therefore you're gone. If it's purely transactional, if it's a relationship, it can get you through a whoops or two.
Mm-hmm.
If they have that trust, and you have built a relationship with a company that you trust each other, and it has to go both ways. So it's the relationship and the trust part of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would agree. I think that's very important. So after participating in the mastermind through the process and through all of the weeks, are there any recommendations you can think of for new folks as they join the mastermind program, as they're coming in?
Yes, there is a lot of information through the session. So you're going to go through this for a year. There's a lot. And if there's a quiz, what was week 2? What was the topic? And give the details of that. Don't try to attack it like that. You look at it as kind of a journey and a buffet is what I look at. And I happen to like buffets. So I don't eat everything on a buffet because I don't like everything on a buffet, and it may disagree with me. I may be allergic to it, but there are tidbits that you grab out of that and you can latch on to. And one of the things I mentioned before that I did some Dale Carnegie training, and one of the younger people walked in my office, says they're pushing at work to go to do these Dale Carnegie things. And I don't know. I don't know if I want to do it. And I go, you should do it, because if there is one item, just one item in the entire class, say 4-month class, one item that you embrace and it changes the way you do things, it was worth it. Not that you get the other 100 and miss the other 110 things that they told you. If you walk away and there's one thing you go, I'm changing the way I work, the way I relate to people, just this one, then it was well worth it. And that's why when you kind of look at it and you can kind of look at the volume of the material and say, I got to become an expert on all of this and know how things connect and interact. Well, that would be nice, but that's not necessary. Treat it like a buffet. Grab the good tasting things. That applies to me. I get that now. I'm going to do that different. May have missed some other things, and on a go around, if you go through the buffet twice, some things are more attractive the second time around than they were the first time around.
Yeah.
So that's what I like.
That's great. That's great advice. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking time to talk to me today, and I appreciate having a chance to talk to you about the mastermind, and we look forward to maybe that other go around on the buffet for you. So.
All right, now that you're hungry.
All right, there you go. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Well, I want to thank both Doug and Dolan for that very timely interview. And as Doug mentioned, there's a lot in this mastermind program. The intent isn't that you learn everything. It certainly isn't. The intent is that there's a deep dive into the mastermind mindset. What's the mindset that you're actually trying to master so that it isn't mastering you? And that's what we've been looking at. There's gravity associated with all of this. And I say gravity. It's an attractive force that bodies that have mass actually exert on each other. Your mindset has mass. And the possibilities that you'd like to have in your life also have mass. How do you bring them together? How do you actually begin to close that spatial and temporal gap so that that possibility can exist in real time and exist in a profitable manner in real time? So thank you for listening to today. We're going to be moving into tomorrow, very simply, day 3. And a large part of day 3 is organizing around what I'm calling leadership presence, your bow wake. Who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear a word you're saying. Learn how to master this superpower, this bow wake. Co-creating coordinated movement is what we're looking at here. And coordinated movement is a function of how you position yourself in your environment. So that's one of the things that we'll be taking a look at tomorrow. This is Blaine Bartlett. I want to thank you again for paying attention to this mastermind session and actually being present with it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.